to move on. I think now we'll move on to item 10:20. I hope that anybody that's there for item 10 through 14 can understand this. We have a lot of people here, I think, that want to speak on this item. I will have the CEO generally discuss what has been proposed, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got Betsy Crickard. She's been working very hard on this from our staff, and she's going to introduce the item. Thank you.
What I'd like to do before I jump into the recommendation is kind of review some of the activities and processes that brought us to this recommendation.
Is there any way we can get a mic here?
No amplified sound.
Maybe she stands up and kind of project that way so we'll go forward and Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay.
A little better.
What I'd like to do before I jump to the recommendation is I'd really like to share some of the activities and events that happened to lead us to this recommendation. At the January special town meeting of the Policy and Operations Board, staff proposed a Brown Act compliant group that would be made up of residential and small business customers. It had a program focus. It would meet twice a month. It would sunset once the outcomes were concluded. The idea was that the group would be evaluating and prioritizing programs, and once that information was available and incorporated into our budget, the group would sunset. The process that we recommended for application was we would like the community to submit an application. We would review the applications. All applicants would be sent to the policy board, and the policy board would eventually appoint the members. Coming out of that January meeting, we received several suggestions from the board and community. One was a suggestion to expand it to all customers. That is residential, small business, agriculture, commercial, and industrial. To broaden the scope, to make the group ongoing, to consider simplifying the process rather than having our community apply for the position, simplify it. And in addition, we received several comments from our community that they would like a non-voting seat on the board. So we took all that information. We also reached out to 5 CCEs that are currently serving customers. We spoke with public agencies as well as nonprofits who also work with advisory councils to get their input. And we reached out to several of our customers through outreach.
I'm sorry. I guess if you stand up for a mic, you would get on the video at least, so maybe you get up there. Yes. Well, I think they can. The audio, video. That's the way it works. Yeah. So at least you can do it on the video. I hope everybody can hear her and.
Can you hear me?
Hopefully that.
We've come a long way, and this is really insulting to tell you the truth. The whole process, including the salary.
Yeah.
I know. People disturbing.
No,
This is not the community choice. Okay.
Yeah.
What would you like?
Go ahead. We need to see.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of people here that want to address us on this issue.
So back up, after we met with everyone in January, we spoke with 5 CCEs.
You can turn around to the side.
Oh gosh.
We spoke with 5 CCEs that are currently operating. We spoke with public agencies and nonprofits that are also working with advisory groups. We spoke with several customers through outreach activities and some of our key accounts. And what we learned is that it's really difficult. There's a lot of contrasting views on all of these various variables that go into establishing an advisory group. But the one that involved the most contrasting views was definitely on the scope of the advisory group. What we heard from some of our customers was they don't want the community advisory council. They are very concerned that it will be driven by special interest groups. They're concerned that membership will not be representative of the community. There's concern concerned that the advisory group will take over some oversight responsibilities from the board, potentially some decision making, and that the agency would ultimately become a very slow, bureaucratic organization. To contrast that, we also heard that there was opinion from several groups that the advisory council must provide input and feedback over all of the agency's operations, including procurement programs. So we have a lot of contracts, a lot of very different opinions on what the advisory group should be looking at. What staff did at that point was we incorporated all of the information from all of the various input points, and we reviewed all the pros and cons, like the scope, the size, membership, and from there, based on that analysis, we made a recommendation. What we're recommending is a 9-member council composed of all customers. We are recommending that it be once a month. We're suggesting a 1 to 3 year staggered term, and I apologize if that caused some confusion. We're saying that for the initial year, you would have a 1 to 3 year term, and then once the first year term expires, the new members would be brought on at 3 years. So the point is, every year you have some experience in the board. For the scope, we suggest prioritizing customer programs. We would also provide input on Monterey Bay Community Power strategic direction. We believe we're recommending that the advisory council perform other oversight functions as requested by the board. In addition to the community outreach, education, and legislative advocacy support, we recommend that the advisory group provide updates at the board meetings. The selection process that we're still suggesting is that staff would post an application through various sources. At that point, candidates would apply. We suggest a 3-member subcommittee of the policy board, then nominate the members, and the policy board appoint the advisory council members. Given that recommendation, we would also recommend for today that the policy board direct the staff to solicit the advisory council. And we're also suggesting that the policy board form a 3-member subcommittee of the policy board to nominate advisory council members. Chair, would you like me to go through all of the pros and cons?
No, I don't think that's necessary. I think that the board members have read it. There was different, I think that the board thing is, your final recommendation is what we're really discussing, plus or minus, so I think that's fine. You want to go through each one. With that, I think that from the board, you could get your comments in. Comment on that before you have to do.
I think I'm trying to make arrangements so I can stay longer. But thank you. I will share my comments if that's appropriate.
You want comments from the board, then we'll do it.
Okay. So I'm glad to see the progress that we've made since the last meeting. I have some concerns with the 9-member board. I think we have 11 members here. I think it would be appropriate to have an 11-member advisory committee. I also think that we would not be here if it were not for the work of many community activists, community organizers, and other community stakeholders. And so I'm concerned that in this sort of discussion of qualities, that really is not acknowledged. And I think we need to recognize that we have stakeholders who are disadvantaged, that we have stakeholders who have concerns about labor, concerns about the environment. And I think those are very important and should be a consideration of the board as this committee is appointed. I'm also concerned with the idea of having a subcommittee, just because from my point of view, I'm not really comfortable with how subcommittees have worked so far with our operations. I would actually recommend that we identify a list of qualities, and then within those qualities, each board member appoints somebody from their region. And then ultimately, when the whole board approves the whole slate of candidates, we can make sure that all of the qualities or characteristics that we're looking for are represented in that group of people. That's kind of where I'm at this moment.
I agree with most of what you said, but I have serious reservations about appointments because this board will change. And I don't want to turn this into a political organization. I want to turn it into a true grassroots community committee. And I believe that the 11 members make sense. I think 9 is a little bit light. I think that while the 3-person subcommittee can bring us a slate, we don't have to accept it. They should just recommend for this board to consider. As elections come and go, as terms come and go, we shouldn't have to worry about the composition of this board. This community oversight group should be independent, and it should be people who outlast us, frankly, and should continue on. And it should be a broad spectrum of stakeholders. So I think they should, again, 11-member board. I think that there's nothing out of their purview to discuss or recommend to us, although they should be very much prioritize their efforts on certain programs, but they can't be restricted to not speak to us about rates or the community's feeling about where we get our power. That's all part of the community input. So again, 11 members. I like the way the 3-year staggered terms, and they should come to us as a recommendation from this subcommittee, and then we can look at it. No one says we have to accept them all. As a group, we can look at this 11-member board, and we can pick and choose, and we can ask them to go back to, here's a substitution, because we think it's weighted too much in this one particular area. There's too many industrial or commercial stakeholders in there. Would give us more residential, give us more people from some lower income groups to give us feedback. So I think this is a good plan to do this for you.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with the comments of my colleagues here. With respect to the question of nominations and having a committee, I'm inclined to, I don't have a real strong opinion on that matter. I do think that we should have an 11-member board. We can expand the number in order to ensure the kind of diversity that we want, that we all say we want to have on this board, diversity of thinking, experience, background. And I do think that I would like to see language in the charge of this committee to include an advisory role on power procurement as well. I think and rate setting. I think it's important. I mean, it's advisory only, and so I don't see why we wouldn't want to have the community, an independent body, advising us about that when we make our decisions. I also want to suggest that I think it would be worthwhile to have the policy board have a liaison from the Community Advisory Committee participate in the meetings, a non-voting role, but I think just simply reporting to us without the ability to really participate in meetings and be a member in the dialogue would be detrimental to the purpose of this committee. So I'd like to see Community Advisory Committee member be here with us and participate rather than just simply coming, getting their 3 minutes to give us a report.
I think the 11 member seems to be approved by most of us at the outset anyway. I think that rather than having a liaison, I think that we should have a specified time on each agenda for a representative of the community advisory board to address us and tell us what about it. I don't think it's necessary to add on to the 11-member board. I think we have a specified agenda item each meeting for a representative from the community advisory council. That would be sufficient to get their word, and they could certainly have one.
I agree with a lot of what's. Thank you, Chair. I agree with a lot of what's been said. I'm looking over an email that I received from the group that's in the audience, I suppose, I just don't know exactly what to see that. But basically, I'm looking over their points. And their first point is an 11-member advisory council. I agree with that. Their second point is this third bullet under number 1 on the recommendation on page 1 of staff report 15. Additional scope, they're suggesting that they be allowed to provide input and feedback, not just input, not just feedback, sorry, and that they want to explicitly include power procurement and rates in their scope, not to let it be up to interpretation, because they see that as extremely important, where our power comes from and how much it costs. Then they suggest this liaison idea that our chair just spoke about, and I think it would not be adequate just to allow them a point early on the agenda, because they're hoping that they'll be able to review the agenda like we do and probably have feedback on all items. And we don't allow them ahead of the agenda item to talk about the items on the agenda. So if they have feedback on every agenda item, they won't be able to provide that feedback if they were given an early time slot. But I think that we hear the back and forth we all engage with every item. That's what they want to be part of too. So I can see them sitting there if there's no room here, and serving like an ex officio that we have on Fort Ortiz Authority, Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. These are ex officio members who do not have a vote, but they can chime in like the rest of us. And we're only talking about one, I think. But at TAMC and these other boards I just mentioned, they'll have 6 to 8 ex officio members who can chime in whenever they want. And it doesn't bog down the process, but it respects those key stakeholders that otherwise would be relegated to the 3 minutes and not be party to the back and forth discussion. So once they give their 3 minutes, they can't say anything else, no matter what new information is discussed. And that's not what they're asking for. They're asking to be as involved moving ahead as they have been since day 1. So I like that liaison being a real part of this meeting. They talk about being more inclusive in the qualifications to include healthcare, labor, energy. There's a long list there that covers the real diversity of our community, and I think that the ultimate motion should speak to that so that the qualifications aren't as limited as they are in the staff report.
I would agree with everything you said, and I've always felt that rather than have a voice on this side of the dais, having the voice from the staff side actually gives them more ability to chime in, because this is sometimes a tough group to spar with. I would rather have someone, and I think it adds a certain amount of weight to what's being said when it comes from the staff table as an ex officio. I totally agree with that. I'm concerned, and I believe that there should be representation from all of these groups, and it should be very broad. I'm worried about labeling a representative on this. Well, this is the labor representative, or this is the ag representative. Certainly, we include everyone, but let's not bog them down with the mantle of a title that kind of changes the way we hear what they're saying. I don't want that to happen. They're all community members. They all have an equal voice.
So you're correct in the qualifications. We're talking about a 9 to 11 member body, and we have the following sectors that are recommended at 13. So we're not going to get, and then there's 6 others that they want to add to it. So I think we have to really be careful. This is no guarantee that this is an agricultural person, this is an environmental person, but I think they each will be represented on the board in their own manner, in their own way. We might have 1 or 2 if you wish, but I think some of those are they duplicate each other. What the recommendations are on social justice, low income, traditionally underrepresented. I do think we want to make sure that we're all ratepayers in this tri-county agency that we're representing here. So we might add 1 or 2 to satisfy, but we're not going to pinpoint somebody as being, like you say, agriculture or environmental or nonprofit or whatever the case may be. So we want to mention that those interests be represented, but we're not going to be able to, or I don't think we should go to having 19 representatives on the community advisory board. Mr. Brennan.
Comment on a few of the things. I think the number, we have to be careful that it doesn't become a town hall. I think 11 members is very difficult to manage in itself, especially if it's not expecting or asking for help. I think 11 would be the maximum we want on a committee that would be effective. I agree with the fact that having an ex officio member part of the group that has the input in the structure. If you agendize their time, at the podium, they could talk about anything that's on the agenda. So if they had an issue on the agenda, they could bring that up while they're on the agenda. But I don't disagree with having somebody as an expert member that has input into the group. Just this morning we demonstrated there's a lot of different opinions. There's a lot just for this level. That's necessary, but I would be cautious to keep the number no more than 11. All of you have been on committees that once they get above 11 members, it becomes a town hall, and nothing is effective. Nothing happens. Because you can't get, it's hard enough to get 11 people to vote one way or another. So it's just real cautious, and I want everybody, I don't want to label. I don't want to say, he's a member of IBEW 1245, that's who we're going to pick, because then he represents all the unions. I think the unions are going to be at those meetings. They're going to be represented to that community act. So I agree with what you're saying, that you should look at these qualifications, but like Cruz said, they're all taxes, but they're all paying utility bills, so they all have interest in different ways, whether it's a farmer or a kindergarten teacher, they're all. If you want to amend this to say 11, I don't have a problem. If you want to have an ex officio member of the team, I don't have a problem. I just think we have to be cautious and not blow this up to be an ineffective committee that meets twice a month. It's going to be difficult to get people twice a month. That's hard to do. Once a month, you won't get 11 members every month.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification on our recommendation when we are suggesting that the chair of this council will make a report to the board. We are not suggesting that he will be limited to come to the podium and speak and be limited to 2 minutes. We are suggesting that their report would be very similar to the Treasury report, to the CEO report, and to any other reports that you may receive from the chair of any commission or subcommittee or committee that you put together at one point.
Thank you. The 11 member, I don't think that there's an issue. I think that based on the balance of the different policy and the operations, it makes sense, because that's a number that works. You can still get quorum out of it. You're seeing that from the policy and the operations side of things. Giving them an item on the agenda where they have the opportunity to come, present, speak, be part of it. It's not a 3-minute limitation on things that are on the agenda or not on the agenda. It makes sense for the CAC to do that. Staggering 1 to 3 years makes sense because we want continuity, we want the experience of those that have been started up to still be able to bring in the newbies on getting them up to speed. It makes sense. We have to focus on a couple things here that I haven't heard so far. And one is the Joint Power Authority. We have 19 agencies that have agreed on what this community choice agreement is going to be based off of. We need to make sure that whatever the CAC does, or the Community Advisory Committee does, it's based off of what's already been agreed on by the 19 agencies. So we have to always make sure that we revert back to the focus of what the CC is about. I think that's really important that we consider. And then the other part of it too is what we really have is a resource that the CAC is for. The JPA has indicated that it's the money that's set aside for that CAC to be working off of, identifying what the money is going to be used for, getting enough of it. Because again, we don't even have any money, but we're always figuring out how we're going to have an agency know how to spend it. So we also need to sort of look at that too. Of right now, that's the role that the JPA has allowed or has agreed CAC to do and to work with. Getting into some of the other minutiae, that's what operations is about. That's what we hired staff to do. On some of the other areas that have come out as, well, we want to be involved in those points as well. So we have to be cautious and cognizant of what the JPA has that's been agreed on by all of the agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with most of what's been said. I definitely agree with the other member of the board or commission. I cannot support any subcommittee to what we saw earlier today. I feel that we should utilize the model of the air district and allow each director to appoint, and in that appointment would be a list of criteria of what we're looking for in a member of this committee. The function of the committee needs to be broad, and I do support that a member, preferably the chair of the committee, would be the official member of the city table with staff.
Yes, just a small comment. I agree with what Jerry Munson just said, and I don't want to mischaracterize what was suggested to us. When we talk about healthcare, small business, social justice, low income, they weren't asking for a person to represent each of those. They were just asking that a broad list be used so that each applicant had to have expertise in at least one of the following sectors, so that there would be a better chance of those sectors being a forte of within the Citizens Advisory Council. So if I could, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, you're surely welcome to.
That we,
I would, you know, like, I think we need to go to the public first.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
City of Marina, we do the motion.
I'm sure, I know that there are a lot of people, how many people want to speak on this? I think we're going to have to, I know it's not going to be popular, but we're going to have to limit this 2 minutes apiece. And if you're competitive of somebody who's also made a point, please make a brief comment when you come up, because I think many of them will be the same, but that's just, I guess. So please line up. Wait a minute.
Just real quick, maybe when, oh, sorry.
I just want to, you promised to break at 10:15. Before we start the public comments, we have a break.
Okay, well, it's 10 minutes, or quarter to 11, 10 minutes, and we'll be back here for sure. 5 to 11, we're going to start.
Thank everyone for their patience. We're back live and in color here now. So that's right. In light of the explanation being made, off audio, so to speak, in the audience, I'd like to have Mr. Bashi just give an overview of what we see as the Community Advisory Council and its purpose and so forth. And just take a summary of that, and then we'll have the public participation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that I would like to comment on is the function of the Community Advisory Council. We were a bit vague in the recommendation for a reason, because as you probably know, we don't have only this board, but we have an operations board. Each board is independent of the other to some extent, with very carefully delineated set of tasks and responsibilities that they need to act on. So what we want to do eventually, and I want to amend the recommendation to include this, if you will, what we'd like to do is to come back to both the operations board, perhaps in April or May, and to the policy board eventually in June, basically saying, here's the list of tasks and responsibilities that you have, and here's some of these responsibilities that we would like to recommend for you to get the oversight of the CAC first before it comes to you, You can go ahead and add or delete from it as you see fit, but go to both boards and ask that same question. So we don't put you in a position today of deciding, for example, to say, we're going to ask the CAC to do ABC, when it just happened that only A is in your purview while B and C is in the purview of the operations committee. That's okay.
I think that was probably any questions on the board on that? Any clarification? So we have a better viewpoint of what we want to have from the Community Advisory Council to our respective boards, which is a different makeup than any other community choice energy agency, I think, in the state. But I think it's really, believe it or not, it's well received and it's being well run. Any other comments that anybody had on this, Mr. McShane?
Just briefly, because I didn't get the chance to say anything earlier, I think it's really important to note that we have one of the most greatest resources in our ratepayers, truly. I mean, I can't think of a public agency that doesn't have a more engaged, active, and passionate constituency. So this idea of an advisory board is awesome. I think that's really, really key. We have to be thinking 2, 3, 5 years down the road. I mean, ultimately, right now we're talking about pretty heavy stuff. Our mission, our CEO, where we procure our power from, and in 3 or 4 years, all of that will be established, and we may not be as cool, so to speak. So we have to think long term. I'm glad that Munzer brought up the idea of the Air District. He and I have served on the Air District for 8 years, and the model of the Air District is pretty awesome. There's no doubt that it's pretty easy. There's accountability. Each director appoints somebody. It's clear this may have a different application, and so I am supporting staff. It's an important point to make. At the Air District, the advisory board chair has an opportunity on the agenda to give a report. It's the middle of the day, they're usually working, and typically the CEO gives the report. I think it's important that we consider a chair someplace out here for the advisory board rep. I don't think they're going to need to comment on everything. I mean, honestly, in 2 to 3 years, if Tom's doing his job, staff's doing their job, we're doing our job, things are going to run pretty smooth. At the Air District level, there is substantive conversation that takes place, detailed conversation. So there will be a good resource, it'll be good digestion and engagement. So I think that's worth observing as well. I want to really compliment Beth. She's done a remarkable job pulling this together. In fact, my commentary to her, as I believe she met with most of us individually, was, wow, this is a lot of work. In fact, the thought that goes into the selection and ultimately putting together this board is incredible. And while it's a whole heck of a lot more involved than if each of us were just to appoint somebody, I think we're going to have a much more representative and functioning group. The other point to make is that when this was first brought forward, it was tasked that this is going to be a pretty involved group. There's a lot of work to do. We have to outline all of our programs. In fact, I think it was recommended that this group meet a couple times or more a month for hours at a time. So whoever is picked is going to be tasked with a pretty big job. And that's not going to go away. And I think that's what Tom was referring to. Right away, there's going to be some pretty heavy lifting on the part of this group. The other thing I would just mention is maybe we think of a cooler name than just the CAC, Stewardship Council, whatever. You know, that's something else. I'm just don't. Okay, that's all.
Thank you. We'll go to the public. I really appreciate your understanding. I'm glad we're live on voice, and appreciate your understanding for 2 minutes, and we'll appreciate any of your comments, knowing that everybody on this board wants a community advisory council, so make that clear. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and I'm gonna actually try to help that point along. There's a number of folks I think that are present here in this room that support this proposal. So I'm going to try to kind of help identify that through my commentary. My name is Brennan. I represent the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Action Compact, but I'm also speaking today on behalf of a broader coalition of a number of organizations and community stakeholders who have come together to try to identify how this might move forward in a productive way. I want to applaud the agency for the work that has been done throughout this process, and especially the work that was done since the January public meeting. So we really appreciate the responsiveness And I want to acknowledge Beth and Marcadato in particular for the work of just talking this through, and we can really see that this is represented in the staff proposal. So thank you. Let's see, I have a few points here to make. So I want to, overall, I want to say that we strongly support the staff recommendation that is before you, with the additional refinements that we've recommended through the public letter that was submitted to all of you prior to this meeting. Bruce Delgado, thank you for outlining several of those points. I'm just going to highlight a couple of those for you. So the formation of the 11-member rather than 9, an increased amount. You may want to consider as well some large members if you move to an appointment-based system. And really utilizing that pool of folks that are available. So 11-member board, also clarification on the additional scope to include power procurement and rates, as well as input and feedback. The liaison to be present on the policy board or in the room. We appreciate that piece as well. And then finally, some additional language in the qualifications on the application just to broaden the scope of who may be able to apply. So with that, I actually want to kind of turn around and ask folks who are here in the room, there's a broad coalition, if you support this, this objective, if you could please stand.
Oh, thank you very much. Good idea. That saves a lot of time. Your message is very clear, so we appreciate you more than you know. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your input.
Hi, Heidi Zamzos, Communities for Sustainable Monterey County. I just, like a fellow public servant, had to take, again, my biannual ethics training, which is mandated by the state of California in AB 1234. And I just thought it might be very useful in framing our deliberations going forward. For those of you who don't know, these are rules relating to public service ethics, are a reflection of that overarching quest for public accountability and trust. It explicitly admonishes the reservation of a seat at the table for the public, going on to state that some efficiency is sacrificed for the benefits of greater public participation and trust in public agency decision-making processes, underscoring the value of having a group of individuals with a variety of experiences, backgrounds, and viewpoints coming together. That is a direct quote. So why is this relevant? AB 1234 training defines what it means to be responsible in public service. Work to improve the quality of life in the community and promote the best interests of the public. The C in NBCP is for community. It's not customer. This is a public agency. It's public created, publicly owned, and just like our country is not a business, neither is this JPA. What it means to be fair in public service, as defined in the training. Promote meaningful public involvement, and I guess that's what we're really trying to get at here. For each of us who shows up here month after month, most of us without remuneration or pay, there are hundreds or thousands who care about the environment, who care about social justice, local jobs, small businesses, economic development, but they can't be here because they have to be at work, they have to be at school, and they have to be home with their kids. And this is the vast majority of the community served by NBCP, yet they're not deemed, in staff's own words, strategic, nor do they have their own dedicated staff member. So those guys get that voice, the rest of us don't have that advantage. These people, they don't just want programs and a pat on the head, they want and deserve to be a salient and active voice in the decision-making process. So having representatives on this CAC, or whatever we call it, will be their voice, and it will help ensure the meaningful public participation mandated by AB 1234. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Seth Caper, and I'm with the APAL Climate Action Team. I'm with the APAL Climate Action Team, and I wanted to also thank Beth and the staff for engaging in an extensive dialogue with us, and we've gotten moved quite along the way in refining the proposal. It's really just a small number of things that we're asking to tweak this. I wanted to speak specifically about expanding the scope. I think that power procurement and rate setting are fundamental to the direction that the agency takes. And we're not talking about getting into the weeds on negotiating for individual contracts. We're talking about, you know, we're going to buy local power, we're going to buy industrial solar power from far away, and we're going to invest in rooftop solar, and we're going to probably do all of those things, but there's going to be a lot of choices about how we prioritize between those things. And similarly with rate paying, once we start generating a surplus, we're going to have major decisions to make about how much of that to put into the rebates, essentially lowering rates, and how much of that we're going to invest in climate change initiatives. So these are big questions that all of us are going to have to work hard to set priorities. I think from talking to Beth, that's going to be a lot of those same issues will be involved in looking at the programs early on that we'd be charged, or not we, but the committee would be charged with working on. And just briefly, in terms of the makeup of the committee, I think this has been made clear from the board discussion, but there's a lot of, we want breadth in that committee. I think we were concerned in the original proposal that said all rate sectors would be represented, and it had a list of them. There were like 5 business categories that would have dominated the 9-member board. And I think it just needs to be clear that these are guidelines. We all want breadth. We certainly want the business community to be well represented, but there's a lot of other interests that we also want to make sure are represented on a diverse board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Shaw Coran. I worked with many Measure Z and Measure J folks to help get CCE adopted, so I'm really happy to see the board here making so much progress. The reason I'm speaking today is because I have concerns about the staff's recommendation of the composition of the Community Advisory Council that represent all customers. I really think that there's a problem with framing it as an aggregation of customers, each representing their own special interest. And they've listed a number of categories like commercial, industrial, agricultural. I'd like to suggest a different framework when you select the representatives for the Community Advisory Council. I think you should select representatives who actually represent our shared interests as a community first, and secondarily their special interests as customers. So thank you so much.
My name is Herb Ahrens. I live in Carmel Valley. I am a small farm advocate. I work for California Farm Link. I've been involved in small farm finance for forever. So I think it's important to recognize that the reason we have Monterey Bay Public Power, Community Power, is that we are a community-based organization that was created at a grassroots level. We're not simply an alternative to PG&E that is focusing on lower rates. So we're essentially policy-driven. And what are those policies that have driven most of us to be part of this organization, or to organize for our community power? One is sourcing power. Are we going to simply purchase the power from PG&E, claim that their power is 50 or 60% derived from alternative sources, which is simply an accounting trick? What we need to do, and the reason that people voted for this, is because we're looking at alternative power locally sourced. So the community council that is being formed has to be involved in sourcing power, in feed-in tariff rates, in setting rates for small businesses, for farms, for individuals, for low-income people. That's really the essence of what a advisory board should be doing. And so I just want to reinforce that as a community-based organization, as a policy-based organization, the advisory council should be involved in all of those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Andy Shaw Coran, and with all due respect to Steve McShane, in his observation that often when you launch things, over time the interest declines. I think this is an exception to that rule,
because I think we're going through the biggest transition in the history of industrial humanity right now. In spite of the fact our president doesn't recognize it, he doesn't recognize many things. But there's going to be a need for community engagement around this issue as we transform our lives in a way that has not happened in many generations. And I think you're going to see a need for you to bring people, and I think my wife talked about not thinking of themselves as customers, but thinking of themselves in the broadest sense as citizens, and not by the president's definition of citizen, but people who live in this region, who are thinking about what's good for this region, and reaching out to other folks and bringing all the skills that they have and all the concerns that they have. And I think that that should be a very robust engagement, and that's what we should be looking for. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Sain of Santa Cruz County, and I'm here representing Citizens Climate Lobby, as well as the Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. Everything's been said, so I'll make this very short. It's obvious that the board staff has done their homework, so that took a lot of my speech away. Basically, I'm here just to work mainly on the number of members. Basically, the group I work with, the coalition, we actually proposed an expansion from the staff recommendation of 9 to 11. This modest expansion will accommodate broader representation goals while still being an efficient size that also matches the size and policy of the operation boards. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Horacio Mesquita, and I'm with the San Gerardo community. It's a farm workers co-op for low-income farm workers. This community was built in '79 by many farm workers and their families, and also by many community members that just donated their time to build that community, and many public officials. So because of that, we tried to help disadvantaged communities to have a better life in Monterey County. So I just want to point out a few things. It will be a good idea to have an expansion of an advisory committee that will have champions on sustainability to protect our communities and our climate. Many communities are not just traditional customers. They belong, they're part of the communities that they don't even have enough money to pay for rent, electricity, gas, food, all those things that communities, disadvantaged communities need. I think the qualifications will be better for having people that are champions on sustainability efforts that are needed in Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito, so we can protect all our residents and have the better life that they deserve. And I think a broader representation of all these people, residents, communities that are disadvantaged, communities that are not disadvantaged, it will be a collection of power, of willingness to make unity and all the residents of the 3 counties. Thank you.
Good morning, how you doing? I'm Mike Mangrum. I'm a local 234 member, IBEW. I think this Community Advisory Council is important. I've lived in this community 15 years. I think you need to have us electricians. You need to have us labor crew involved in all of this. I think it's very important. I mean, I took off work away from my 5 kids, even my adopted children, to come in here this morning and make sure you guys know this. I don't have much to say on it, but I just want to make sure you guys know this is really important and that you really should have the support of our local unions. All right, thank you.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Juan Martínez y yo soy de González, California. Estoy aquí para presentarles unos problemas que hemos recibido del público sobre el comité que ustedes están averiguando aquí hoy. Están diciendo que quieren proponer 9 miembros para la mesa directiva. La comunidad en general está pidiendo 11. La razón es muy simple, eso es que ellos creen que no hay oportunidad para que ellos estén en la mesa dando sus opiniones de qué es lo que ellos creen, de qué debían hacer con su gran oportunidad. And I'm mainly saying that I'm here from Gonzales, California. My name is Juan Martinez. I wanted to say that in Spanish just to give you the heads up on that. And of course, that's a subliminal message there. But I do want to say that we did bring forth to you our suggestions. I'm here to support those. And again, just to put a caveat on that, from 9 to 11, mainly because we have quite a few folks there in South County who feel that they're not going to be a part of this because it's too small. For example, the veterans are asking for support as well, since they fought for oil and energy for this country to keep us strong, to keep us ready and able. And I think power is going to be a big one, especially electrical and gas and etc. So I don't know what, I mean, I could tell you more. The campesinos, they could really afford to pay the rent. And in my situation, I have a couple of rentals, and I'm paying for the rent only because I want families there. I don't want a bunch of guys living in there, renting out the rooms, 3 or 4 to a room. I want families with kids, with, you know, that family atmosphere. I want that in my neighborhood. So I'm offering that, but I'm paying for the rent. I'm paying for the gas and electricity just to make that happen. And they have some great ideas, and we look forward to it. Muchas gracias.
I'm Kevin Dade, and I represent an organization called Clear and Honest Options in Clean Energy, representing business groups and taxpayers, the sometimes maligned customers. And I want you as board members to keep in mind that ultimately somebody has to pay for all this, and it's the people who are going to be paying their electric bills. And there needs to be people on this community advisory committee who don't regard the customers as just people who need to change their behavior or pay money for this and that. Those people are going to need to have a role on this community advisory committee as well. I will be applying for this community advisory committee. Depending on what the selection process is, my chances may go from pretty good to no way in a million years. And I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm opposed to project labor agreements too, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But the question is, do you really want a diverse community advisory committee or not? And one thing I see here is that this diversity may be completely uniform in terms of ideological thinking. I encourage you to take perspectives from many different areas, and particularly consider the people who are going to have to pay for this. Thank you.
Good morning, how are you? Demetrio Pruneda. I'm a retired teacher, and about 4 or 5 years ago I got involved with 2 community grassroots organizations, and we fought really hard in San Benito County to pass Major J, and I think it was very successful only because the community got involved. I also got involved with Major Z in Monterey County, and guess what? We also defeated one of the biggest, most powerful entities in the United States, that's the gas and oil companies, and that was only because the community got involved. So if you really want to know what's going on in the community, you must have lots of community members in this organization, because it's a community that's living the needs. The vast majority of you may not understand the needs of the community, not because you don't want to, but because you're not there in the community. I see that I don't get a good feeling here that we have enough community involvement here, and many times the politicians, no matter if they have good intentions or not, they cannot represent the community because you never listen to the community. So I hope that you start listening more to the community, because it is the community that knows what's going on. Thank you.
Very briefly, my name is Karen Osmondson. I'm actually on the school board for the Otto Valley Unified School District here in Watsonville. And my job is my work is in solar. I work with a company out of Hollister. It's called Solaris. That I work with in the The owners are named Julio Martinez and Octavio Sandoval. So with that, I was going to say that all of you here really quickly are white, of course, you are all white. So I'm hoping that the Community Advisory Committee and everything will represent the demographics of our community, which is not like here in Watsonville, you know, I'm in the minority. So yeah, so I hope, you know, we will reach out to all of the community and get representatives to work with us that represent the demographics of our communities here in this area, this whole area. Thank you.
My name is Alexandra Klikoff. I'm here representing Santa Cruz Indivisible Climate Solutions Group. My position is head of private practice in Aptos for almost 20 years. So I've been in the community for a while. Most of what I would say has been said, and I just want to say that we would strongly advocate for a community voice in this power venture, that it represents a more sustainable alternative to what we have had, and we feel we're facing a climate crisis, and we love that the community is really coming forward to try to address that. I think this is a moral charge. This is not just business. This is how are we going to all come together in a way that works for us to try to help and protect our environment and preserve it for our children and grandchildren. I think that increasing to 11 makes sense. I think having an ex officio representative who can speak to any issue really makes sense. Just watching some of the debates today, and that's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Flodine. I'm a retired teacher, and I, of course, am here also to support the idea of the Community Advisory Council. But I wanted to say especially that I really, really appreciate Mrs. Parker's comments. And I was very deeply disturbed listening to that conversation about renewing the CEO contract. And I do not know the gentleman, and I'm sure he's a wonderful person, and I have no personal attacks here, but issue about the process. I first heard about community power from another retired teacher in about 2007 or 2008. And there were some early conversations in Monterey, teachers and little people. And I have been watching this process, and I am so happy to see that it's actually arrived. But just a few months ago, I had the sense that it was getting derailed. And, you know, we have this national situation where there is corruption, there is self-interest, there is a complete disregard for protocol and process. And today, in that earlier conversation, I felt that that was what I was witnessing right here. And so I just wanted to make sure that, you know, teachers are earning around $40,000, $50,000 a year, maybe top probably about $80,000. So the idea that a community power agency would be paying over $300,000 to one individual, I find egregious. And we need money. I was told that this agency was going to be holding on to more or less PG&E rates because they needed money. Let's use that money for community power and not for corporate stuff. Thank you.
Hi folks, glad the sound's back on. I'm Joe Jordan from the west side of Santa Cruz. Been involved in this since before the beginning. I'm one of the main teachers and educators of renewable energy throughout this region, about every academic institution you can name, as well as a lot of private enterprise. And I'm excited about this because mainly of the renewable energy thing, and that's what most people, and especially the folks who want to have this, you know, really open, diverse community advisory council are excited about. I do a radio show now that's gone worldwide, Planet Watch Radio. You should check it out, planetwatchradio.com. We interviewed Sean Marshall back in November when this was still kind of getting going. And we want to have more interviews and features of what you and we are doing soon. And and it'll go out to the world, and we want to talk about something that's really special. And what will make this really special is representing the community in just the best way yet. So that's kind of what I'm pushing for. Ross Clark, who's already left, I gave him that line, "Be bold," that he used for you all earlier, way back when the PDAC was meeting. Some of you might remember that. I said, "Be bold. Let's go for the best." Because otherwise, my two words that come to mind are, why bother? You know, why are we doing this if it's not to get the best, you know, clean, limitless, homegrown, democratically distributed renewable energy out there on the grid? And I know that it's a tough chicken or egg problem. You know, when it's not already widespread, it's kind of expensive, so it's hard. But there's the chicken and the egg. Are we going to be the chickens who wait for others to do this, or are we going to be the egg that hatches something really new and exciting? So go for it. Okay, thanks.
Hi, West White Salinas resident. I have really good confidence that you're going to do very well at this vote here for the advisory council. You'll probably do an extra 2 for 11 on the way. I'm feeling that anyway. What really blows me out is this double vote thing from last year, and it seems like the same people are still trying to circumvent this community effort. This 4-7 vote kind of illustrates that with the CEO. It seems like whether they got authority or not, they're going to do and drive what they want to do. And our special interest is, in fact, the county of Monterey, the city of Salinas, and the county of Santa Cruz, because they're the biggest guys. And they won that double vote, and they're still doing this in-game stuff. And that's what I'm totally pleased. This looks very front-facing. It looks wonderful. And this advisory council is going to be pretty, I hope they're more mindful of that whole percolation. Because that I think is our special interest, which is our own people, and we're not worrying about community as much as worrying about tax revenue or our own projects and our own whatever. It's supposed to be a community process. That's why it's a 1 vote apiece for each place, and that's the way you've got to really perpetuate that and push that and stifle it before it gets in front of you next time, please. Thank you.
Chairman Pearson, members of the board, my name is Benjamin Eicher. I'm the director of Green Power, which is part of the Romero Institute. I'm the person who sent you the email last night with some proposed changes. And I just want to start off by saying we are really thrilled that we're here making this decision about a community advisory council, really happy with the progress that we've seen in the proposal and the engagement that's taken place. I want to give a big thanks to the staff for all the work that's been done. And I think I just want to make it very clear that we absolutely support the staff's recommendation with a few minor amendments. And I'll just point those out again really quickly. I think the first one, in the email I've really explained precisely what we believe would be best, but it's an 11-member advisory council, and then just changing the wording from representing customer classes to representing the diverse people and communities of our area. Certainly, of course, customers are going to be in there, but also there are people in our community that aren't traditional customers that may be very important to have a voice on this as well. Secondly, in terms of the scope, we're adding just some simple words, saying including power procurement and rates. Those issues are so important, such a core function of what this agency does, that including them explicitly in the scope we think is totally appropriate, and then it just makes it very clear that that's certainly one of the issues that the committee should have input on. Number 3, we added this bullet point about a liaison. It just seems that the function process of how the CAC is interacting and serving the board was missing from the proposal, so we've simply clarified it that the Community Advisory Committee would appoint someone that's the liaison to the boards. And then finally, I know that there was a little bit, maybe more discussion about the 4th change that we proposed, but it's a change not actually to the description of the CAC, but really the qualifications that are listed in the application. And it's really based very much on staff's language. It just adds a few categories and makes a statement about diversity. And I just want to address the point that it's not about checking boxes. In fact, it will give you more liberty in the appointment process if you have broader categories to choose from. So thanks very much, and we're really looking forward to this Community Advisory Committee getting up and running.
Thank you.
about this. The community. Thank you for your understanding and the 2 minute and having, shall we say, a collective speaker for some of you. I'm going to bring this back to the board, and I just want to make a statement to the community at large. Having been involved in this for 5+ years and really seeking outreach, we wouldn't be here today, and I fully understand that, and everybody on here does, representing the communities throughout this Tri-County region, of your tremendous support system and your input that made this become a reality. And we are here to serve you. There's no question about it. This is a new phase in power generation and how it can be governed, so to speak. We want to do it in most sensitive, environmentally sensitive, and economical way that we can that'll save customers money in the process, and we think we can do that. That's why we're here, because we have this opportunity from state legislation that was in 2002. We have seen it work in other places. This is the first Tri-County agency of its type in this state and possibly the nation. And for all of these communities, these 3 counties and 16 cities to come together is quite an accomplishment. And the reason we did it is because you had input with it and we reached out. We have done that before and we are going to do it in the future. I just want to guarantee you that. And that's why we're here to serve you. Any other comments that we might have from the board?
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I would like to just say that I appreciate all of the input we've had, and I also appreciate the fact that the Community Advisory Committee is an opportunity for us to not just rely on the public to advocate at the PUC or within the community, but rather to let us understand how the community is thinking about these issues. And so I really appreciate the tweaks that were sent to us as suggestions, and I think from the comments earlier, I think we're all pretty supportive of those. The other thing I wanted to mention is in the list of qualifications and the groups and sectors that we might be looking at to include as participants on the committee, I did just want to comment that one of the suggestions was that we explicitly say that we look at small businesses that are locally owned and operated, rather than, I think, listed in the staff's list as commercial, industrial, and agricultural. Those folks they have a whole separate group. And so I think I just agree with the emphasis being on the small business folks participating on this committee, the locally owned and operated, because the larger entities will have their own group that will be meeting and discussing their issues. So with that, I'd be prepared to make a motion that we move forward with the Community Advisory Council as staff has presented, with the suggestions made by Green Power and the community groups, being the 11-member council, that we include the language in the scope to say including power procurement and rates, that we adopt the concept of an ex officio member of this board, and that we broaden the list of entities and groups that we're interested in having participate on the committee. I second, and I'd like to make a couple of friendly amendment suggestions, if I may, Jane. Give it a whirl. That on the appointment process of 11 members, that we say that they will represent all who live or work in our community rather than just customer classes. That the appointment of each Citizens Advisory Council member be by one policy board member, and that it be consistent with the staff report conclusion on page 8 of the staff report, which talks about that. The main point there is that it is from an applicant pool. So each of us would appoint one person from an applicant pool. So my friendly suggestion is that each each CAC member be appointed by one of the each of us has an appointment on that from an applicant pool created as explained in the conclusion on page 8
of today's staff report, and that, as you mentioned, on the third bullet on scope, it also includes the words input and feedback, not just feedback. And then to make it clear, my last friendly amendment suggestion is that the ex officio non-voting member is to participate fully, similar to board members, at meetings and leading up to board meetings on both the operations and the policy board meetings. And I want to note, and that's the end of my substitute motion, and I want to note that in the table of organization, the policy board is just above the operations board. So it's appropriate on occasion for us to give policy directives to the operations board, similar to a city council giving directions occasionally to a planning commission on policy matters. But I think if we don't have the ex officio on the operations board, there will be things cooked up already brought to us without the glue and the continuity that liaison could provide between the operations and the policy board. So those are my friendly amendment suggestions.
Okay, most of them I accept. The one I have a question about is I'd like to hear some discussion from the other board members, sort of from a practical perspective on the individual appointment by policy board members of folks from the pool. I guess this is one of the thornier parts of this, of how is the selection going to be made, and so I guess I'm feeling sort of up in the air about whether a subcommittee of the policy board is the best way to go, or as was suggested earlier in the comments, maybe we get all of the applicants and then all of us, try to make the soup from all of the ingredients. I'm just not sure how it's best to proceed on that, so I'd love to get...
if I could just, maybe just ask staff about this, having maybe seen some in the community action councils of other boards, do you see this, I want to make this work as smoothly and inclusively as possible. Is there anything, does this look like it's workable, the basic outline of what we have? I'm just trying to look at, for this, the staff implications and so forth as well, and how this would work. Maybe some of these things have worked very well in some places and not so well in others. I just want to try to get a sense of how you think this works.
It depends, obviously. A very large group is a little difficult to actually get meaningful input. So to the extent that you want to expand the group to 11, I think that's very workable. I think it's very close to what we are recommending, non-member staff. There are a couple of issues that I know the ex officio is on only one board that I'm aware of from all the operating CCAs, and what I've got from some of the folks that talked to me behind, off the record, so to speak, they basically say that it's difficult and it adds sometimes several hours to the meetings. I've worked for 2 cities where I had advisory commissions working with us to advise the city council on matters of electric utility and even power supply purchases. And in each case, as well as what we had with the Silicon Valley Clean Energy, there was a representative from the advisory board that came to the meeting and gave a report to the city council. That is the approach that I'm accustomed to. I don't know how the ex officio member works. I've never been in the position of having to have that on any of the boards or the councils that I've served in the past. And all I've got on it is what I've got from that single CCA that gave me their input a while ago. As far as the one issue that I want to repeat that again, that I don't believe there's something in the JPA that puts either the policy board or the operations board ahead of the other one. I think they're 2 different boards. To the extent that there is, I know Angela is looking for it right now, but to the extent that that doesn't exist, it is advisable perhaps to make sure that the policy board don't make assignments to the operations board before the operations board had a chance to look at it and concur with the policy board on it. And that's why I was suggesting early on to amend the recommendation to allow us later on to come in and give everything that each board is doing or responsible for and put it in front of you, and then you can make a determination as to which of these tasks that you have an oversight over that you want to assign to the advisory board. I think it's important that both boards have their input there in deciding what the function of the board will be, how many issues they're going to be reviewing and giving you advice on. And I think that's said, Mr. Chairman. I think I agree that we need to broaden and make sure that we have as many representatives groups as we possibly can. But I think that's going to be done naturally once we receive the application and put them all together, and whether we bring it to a 3-member board or a subcommittee, or we bring it to everybody over here to make the selection. To be honest, they're different. It's up to you. I thought that just a 3-member board would be a little bit easier to manage, so they can make a selection. I think the idea of having every member of the agency make a selection, one, leaves out 8 members who are not sitting on the board right now, which they may question, and 2, which is more important in my view, you may end up all picking one person that talks and looks and behaves and pushes for what all the other people will be doing. So I'll end up pretty much with no diversity at all. It is a possibility, and for that reason, it is my suggestion that you either collectively, all of you, or a smaller member that you trust will be able to make the selection on your behalf. Look at all the applications and make the selection as you see fit.
Mr. Chair, if I could just speak to the amendments. I accept all of the amendments, I think except 2. The one really does have to do with the process by which the applicants are selected. I think that going with the, it's all going to be imperfect, so I think we just pick something and try. I think having a 3-member subcommittee, and if you want to have it be like the supervisors from each county or something like that, to do the initial screening and try to set up a recommendation to the full board that has a measure of balance, and then but include, when we do the recommendation, be clear about who we've selected and what balance that constitutes, but then also include all the other applications in the staff report, so that board members can take a look to see, is there somebody better, so that when we have our discussion, you have all the information that you need right at your fingertips to, if there's going to be a difference. So that one, and then in terms of the amendment related to the functioning of the ex officio member, I'm comfortable having that, speaking for the policy board, and having that person participate fully. I was thinking it would be a non-voting, but otherwise fully participating board member, and let the operations board figure out how they want to interact.
Jane, to clarify, so that ex officio would not have a role at the operations board?
Right, it would be up to the operations board to decide how they want to have the advisory council interact with them.
Can I just say something real fast? So the JP is very clear on how the policy board and how the operations board are selected and how they're comprised. It doesn't have any mention of allowing an ex officio member to be on the board. So to officially say that they're on the board, I think would not be in accordance with the JPA unless you want to go through amendment processes. They could be participate at the meetings, and you could set roles for them, but if they're officially on the board, that might be an issue to think about. The authority.
If we allow them, as I said initially, to have an agenda item and be allowed to speak on any issue on the agenda,
That would be fine. Yeah, absolutely, that would be fine. But if you're talking about them officially being a part of the policy board, that would probably be right.
Maybe the maker of the motion would accept another friendly amendment that would
set a track here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, no problem. That would set forth that their role would be in accordance with the JPA. We're not going to go back and amend the JPA. It's 20 entities and everything else. So I think that kind of cleans that up.
Maybe, although then that doesn't give us full guidance, but we do want to be in compliance with the agreement. But I think what Chair McPherson said was to have a place on the agenda and to be able to speak to any agenda item.
Correct.
I think that achieves a lot of, I see a...
Right, I was the friendly amender there. Having them speak once, let's say at the start of the meeting on every agenda item, is different than having them participate in our discussion. We have so much back and forth at different points of each item that if they're cut out early, they're going to feel cut out.
I get that. The initial agenda, I just wanted to make sure that they get more than 3 minutes, so to speak. I'm fine with allowing them to speak on any item.
So whatever's legal, let staff work out is what my suggestion would be, so that they are a full participant in the meeting, similar to us, non-voting, but not violating the JPA.
That's, yes, that's where I was going to go.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. On my appointments. I agree with this entire board being members of the 20 people, the 11 people. I think each member should appoint one, because who better knows the community and who better knows the people that represent each community? Like, I would pick somebody from the city of Hollister that would represent the city of Hollister. Maybe not 100%, but I have an idea of what's going on in Hollister and what's necessary. And I think all of us would have that same knowledge of those people. And so if the pool is handed to us, and that's what we pick from, what if there's nobody from San Diego County that has the opportunity to go online and fill out an application? I think we should make sure that we have our own representation so that all the communities feel like they're part of this. Because it's just as important to have all the different groups participate, but the communities have to feel like they're part of this also. Because it came right down to, as Ruth pointed out, when all 16 communities decided to go with the JPA, it was quite intense, at least at my council meeting, as to the people that didn't like it and the people that did like it. So I think we have to be careful that we don't just pick people from the ones we like, or the ones we think are going to think like we're thinking. We have to make sure, each one of our members or each one of our appointees is representing who we want.
If that is the case, I would like to, wouldn't have to be written, but if you're a representative, the ones with a team of 2 or 3, make sure that even the board member be involved, and the other representatives from those other cities, or as the case may be included in that process of discussion. That would be important.
Well, to that point, here's an interesting, I think once, twice, 3 times, I'm trying to think how many people in the room that have showed up from the city of Salinas. We're the single largest jurisdiction from a city perspective in the service area. We get 4 or 5, Omar, right? Wes is here, I'm glad Kevin is, also Steve. I can name them, call them out, but consistently, so I could just imagine there may be some jurisdictions that don't submit applications, or they may be weak candidates, I don't know, or disqualified for some reason, felon or something, I don't know. But whatever the case, I don't know, there is some trust that's going to need to be put on the part of staff to do recruitment, and on the part of us to do recruitment as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that goes, I think we've come to some pretty good compromise, and yeah.
Yes.
So I was initially concerned about the idea of a subcommittee, but I think if it includes the 3 supervisors and we kind of know that going in, I would be comfortable with that. And I think the 3 supervisors will be cognizant of geographical representation and all of these other types of representation that the community has brought to our attention in bringing their recommendation. And then it'll be a recommendation, and if somebody feels like there is an important gap, they can bring that up when we ultimately approve the committee.
Yes, Ms. Brown.
Really quickly, while I would prefer the entire board have the ability to bring nominations, if not direct appointments, from the full group, I am, I'm okay with moving in the direction that it sounds like my colleagues are going in that regard, and I absolutely support all of the motion and for the revisions and the amendments that we made.
Okay. Any other discussion? Comment.
No, when we first got this started, the Community Advisory Committee was the ad hoc. And the ad hoc was based on money that was allocated to set aside for the purpose of this committee to decide what the funds were going to be used towards. I'm not hearing too much on the discussion of the direction we've taken and the control of that particular amount of the money for the projects that the advisory committee or the ad hoc or now the actual committee itself that's being formulated is supposed to take and monitor and make a decision on based on the criteria of the JPA. I think that at one point it was about $3 million. This is what the committee was supposed to be allocated to do. Can we go back a little bit on that and how that's changed as the course of these comments?
Yeah, I think initially our thought was we'd put an ad hoc group together that they would look into all the various programs that we should implement and prioritize, and then let the staff go out and do what they need to do. There was no allocation of money per se. It was just letting the committee know that this is the amount of money that we have allocated for the programs based on the cost of adopting each one of those programs. It looks, and the priorities, it looks like he's the ranking order, and go ahead and discuss it and let us know which ones you want to pick first. That is now by the sideways because we are having an ongoing advisory committee. I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is an advisory group, so we will, to the extent that you tell us these are the issues that we want the advisory group to look into, we will bring it to them first, and we will take their action, make any adjustments that we need to make, then go back to you with recommendation, and in that recommendation we will be very clear as to which direction the advisory group wanted to go to, and even tell you what kind of voting came out of whatever that issue that we'll bring into you. But there is no money per se. The money is all pretty much in the operation, and we'll take the issues one at a time and take it to you folks. And again, run it by the advisory group to the extent that you are comfortable with that.
To continue on the questions here, the other thing is procurement and rates has come up in the discussion now. What impact, where would we be at on that? Because I believe that there's some sensitivity to that process that the agency has when it's negotiating that. So what kind of impact would that have if this were to be followed through with an advisory committee on procurement and rates from where we are right now?
Again, to the extent that you agree that this is a good thing for the committee to look at first, then what we will do is to go to the committee first and say for the next 3 years, or we are about to enter into a number of agreements for long-term supply that have all these issues associated with it. Here's the contract, here's the benefit that comes from those contracts. They will deliberate. If they agree to it, we certainly hope that they do, because we are in the middle of negotiations and we are trying to bring resources, renewable resources to the community. Then these recommendations will move to you folks. If they don't, then we'll have to ask, should we continue to move these recommendations to you, or should we hold back based on the decision that we get from the advisory group? That is the approach that I've done more often than not with other folks. I do at least know that in probably 10 years I've been involved with other advisory groups that reported to council eventually. Everything that went to the advisory group were adjusted and eventually went to council on at least 2 occasions in 10 years. The staff had a different view than that of the advisory group. We still went to council, and the council made the decision accordingly. So.
Mr. Chair and Ms. Kaufman-Gomez, I just want to say that I think what I heard from the public was not so much that they want to get involved at the negotiating stage or level, but rather to be talking about sort of policy goals of where do we want to go in terms of our procurement mix. So maybe both things will be true, but my sense is that the role of the advisory council is more on the sort of that strategic direction level rather than they may have comments on, you know, contracts, but the work that I would really value is for them to come up with a broader strategic direction for how we might think about sources and mix and all of that over time. And that's what I think I heard from one of the comments from the public as well, just as we're thinking about how that would all play out.
Yeah, I mean, just following up on that really quickly, I agree with Board Member Parker's point about this, and I just think about, you know, just to kind of help us wrap our minds around it, I've been thinking about the kind of socially responsible business model. So having, you know, I mean, I did a lot of work in, you know, governance of global supply chains, and the organizations that were third party and had a strong grassroots community advisory component to them seem to be do a lot better at advising their decision makers and, you know, making the right choices when it comes to ethical business practices. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about this as well, not negotiating or, you know, advising on individual contracts. And it seems that, you know, the policy perspective is well.
Yeah, I think the biggest debates to come are going to be what we're going to do with our surpluses. And it's a good debate, a friendly debate to have. It's going to be some different opinions on what we should do, but we're going to have that opportunity. And there's going to be some things and decisions made. We're going to get input throughout along the way. So, any other comments?
I guess also, Mr. Avashi, you talked about where we are with the particular vote, but we're also taking it back because operations is going to have the same kind of content, and then compare and contrast with what our approval does versus what their approval does with the 2 boards. Can you sort of have the conversation about what we're approving today and having to go back on operations of what we're going to go through for the conversation and sort of how you're going to align the 2 sets of votes, I guess?
I think the recommendations that we made as it relates to the function of the advisory board, as I mentioned earlier, is very vague, and what I suggested that we amend the recommendation to state that in May and June we would go back to the operations board and to the policy board to try to delineate the function and the responsibilities of the advisory board. So it would be done with inputs from both boards, and at the time the advisory board is put together, which I'm certainly hopeful will be no later than June. At that time, we will also have what the function of that board would look like, or perhaps even bylaws and a variety of other things that we can bring in. But at this point, it may be immature to decide on what the function is. I'm not too sure even the 2 adders that came in the letter yesterday are all it. I think there may very well be a number of other things that you would want to involve the advisory board in, but I think that has to be done in a later date.
So part of protocol, if there's a motion and a second and he's making a recommendation to postpone, he's making a recommendation to postpone this as a vote for Mark.
I think you want to move on.
Yeah, the recommendation stands, and the only thing that I'm recommending that we postpone is just delineating the function of the advisory board, or stating what the task of the advisory board will be. Right here we offered prioritize customer programs and provide strategic direction or provide input on strategic direction. The letter that you all received yesterday and have been endorsed by a number of you has also a couple of other things, which is rates and power procurement. I think these are very global and they need to be a little bit more pinned down. And what I'm suggesting is, as it relates to the function of this group, let's come back again in May and June, well, June in your case, just to be clear that we get the input of the operations committee as well.
Okay, I just would, that's being said, I'd like to be in a position to make a decision in June then of how we're going to proceed.
Make a decision now.
Mr. Chair, what I would suggest is, I think
Get elections in June.
what I think is being suggested is to get some input back and forth, but I think what's appropriate is to seat the advisory committee, have them develop their bylaws and spell out, related to their scope, what are going to be their priorities, and then that would come to the policy board and possibly the operations board for ratification. I think let the committee do its work, and then we have the final say. But rather than we trying to create the shape and we give it general parameters, and then I think we have enough to move forward today and let that refinement come as the council forms itself and sets up its bylaws and its priorities.
I think it's Chairman McPherson, I think Supervisor Parker just saved my neck. I think this is a very good suggestion that we see them first, let them decide on what they want to do, bring that back to you and to the operations board, and let you decide, yes, this is what we want you to do, or we're going to scratch a couple of things and add a couple of
things. That is going to take some time. Okay.
No, sir, I'll just repeat what you said in essence, that we should seat this board now or go forward with this vote, but this board should be, at this stage, have input on all matters regarding...
Hell yeah!
There are no no-fly zones for the Community Advisory Council. They can certainly make recommendations on anything and make comment on anything. So I think we're, talking about the angels in the head of a pin here. Let's just go forward and pass this.
Mr. Munson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want clarification maybe from Benito. The status of this committee is going to be an official member, non-voting, or they're just going to come be agendized?
I think they were going to be agendized so we didn't have to amend the JPA. Go ahead.
Just to be specific, the authority that the board is relying on in creating the committee is 3.5 of the JPA. It says the board may establish any advisory committees they deem appropriate to assist in carrying out the CCA program, other energy provisions, and the provisions of this agreement, which apply to the Brown Act. So you're relying on that to create the committee, but they're not. But if you want them to be members of either board, that's going to be requiring an amendment.
Okay, and that's what I want the public to understand, that we are bound by the articles of the JPA, and the JPA would have to be amended by the 20 agencies for us to do anything else. So I just want that clarified. Thank you.
Yes.
I believe the request was, ex officio member or some kind of liaison role, so that the person who actually serves in that role can participate in the meetings. And I don't know that there's anything in our JPA bylaws that would preclude that kind of participation, just not being seated as a member. So
There's definitely nothing that precludes it. There's nothing that specifically authorizes it, but it doesn't preclude it. And as long as they're not an official member of the board, I think that.
Can we say that they participate in the entire meeting? As far as us asking, having a conversation, them having input throughout the meeting, as opposed to, and I think what we're all worried about is a little capsule of agendized comment from CAC, and then we never hear from them again, as opposed to someone perhaps sitting at a staff location and we were able to reach out to them and have some dialogue.
Hell yeah.
I'd like to read my friendly amendment that is approved as part of the motion regarding this. that the CAC representative be a non-voting member to participate fully, similar to board members, on the policy board meetings and lead up to the board meetings. And then we had a discussion later that just had to be JPA compliant.
Right. Yeah, I think we're angels, pinhead, like, I mean, this board should have trust that the staff is listening, and I think we're headed in the right direction. Like, we don't need to go another 20 minutes.
We've been agreeing for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I think, okay, now to clarify, are we clear on the motion? I mean, there's a motion, and who's seconding that?
Mr. Delgado.
It would be nice to run through it so we're clear.
We need to do that. Do we have that clear? Can you repeat it, or you don't have that?
Oh, she doesn't have everything. Okay, so my motion was to approve the recommendations of staff with the changes of an 11-member council rather than 9, the addition into the scope of including power procurement and rates, the ability of a member of the Community Advisory Council to participate as fully as possible in board meetings, and now we're saying, you know, as fully as possible, subject to the keeping in conformance with JPA, and that the language that the community groups expressed in their letter regarding qualifications be included on the application form. And then I further said we could even delete commercial, industrial, and agricultural because they have their own group. And what we've specified, what the groups have specified in their language is, you know, small businesses locally owned and operated, which I think conforms. And then there were a series of friendly additions to the motion.
And can I repeat those so everyone's clear?
Please.
That it was to replace the words in the opening sentence under number 1 on the recommendation, replace the words all customers with all who live or work in our community. Because we heard from the public that they want it to be community-oriented, not customer-paying oriented. Anyway, so that was my first, is this all who live or work in the community under number 1 sentence in the recommendation. The third bullet down would include provide input and before feedback. So read input and feedback. That was an additional, okay. And then that the liaison be, as Supervisor Parker mentioned it, but also in the lead up to the board meeting. So participate fully, similar to board members, on the policy board meetings and lead up to those meetings.
So that they would be getting all notifications and agendas. That's what you mean by that, right?
And Jane, I'm sorry, but I took pretty good notes, and I don't remember you recommending that we delete ag, industrial, and commercial. I have written down that it would be a broad list, and I'm more supportive of that than a specific call out to delete ag, industrial, and commercial.
Okay, I remember it was a comment, but it doesn't necessarily have to be part of my motion.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the other thing we need to make sure gets into the motion is that the 3-member subcommittee of the policy board, I mean, it's been tossed around, but I guess I'll just put it in my motion that the 3-member subcommittee of the policy board be the 3 supervisors from the counties, and that they would they would make a recommendation from the applicant pool to the full board, but also include all other applications so that the board members have the ability to really see, does the recommended makeup really provide the balance from their perspective.
All right, question for clarity. Jane, so that the appointments are not specific to each member of the policy board, we're forming the CAC as a body, so that as this board changes, that Community Advisory Council remains stable and ongoing. Good, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess just to comment on that, Jane, at least from Monterey County's perspective, we're putting a lot of trust in you. So there's a role there, and I just, yeah.
But it's not absolute. I mean, we're gonna, as the 3 supervisors, we're gonna look at it, we'll do our best.
Okay.
And then, rather than call you up and ask for your opinion, which would start to get into Brown Act issues,
Absolutely.
we're gonna bring it to the full board and to the public with all of the information so that then you have the opportunity, you may hear from the public, well, we think that person should be changed out, or you may see, oh, I think this person would be better. And then you'll be able to, at the board meeting, make any adjustments to the recommended makeup.
Okay.
That works.
I just want to clarify that I know that the commercial, industrial, the ag, we never had them separated. We brought them all together, so we need to make sure that we're including that sector.
She agreed with that.
And so I just want to make sure that that's clarified, because it wasn't a separate board. We want to make sure that it's included in this list.
Well, there is a separate board, but having some membership, I think, is probably healthy.
I think they clarified that there is not a separate board. It's a working group.
Exactly. Well, whatever.
It's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
Just to
call it what you
qualify
will.
for everyone, there is not even a working group. We've consolidated what we initially said. It's going to be a working group with a large one and a smaller group that will have a time and a responsibility frame. That is gone now. We are talking only about a community advisory group that brings everybody together. And there's another clarification to the point the amendment that Supervisor Parker have offered. I think you've offered that we need to add certain things to the function of the group. I would like to suggest that we go back to what you suggested earlier, which is once the CAC is seated, they can write the bylaws and they can list all the functions that they would like to get involved in. And after that, we will bring it back to you and to the operations board to approve. That is one recommendation that I haven't heard yet, or one amendment to our recommendations that I haven't heard yet, which you suggested earlier, and I wholeheartedly agree with.
It's just a process now. That's how things usually work. So
I think that would be accepted. Okay. We clear on that? The other comments from the board?
No.
You clarify that?
The clarification is, once the CAC is seated, then they will be able to write the bylaws and then bring it back to the policy board for approval.
right, rather than the policy board and the operations board discussing at our next meetings what we want the advisory committee to do, we're going to have the advisory committee come up with its bylaws and scope and priorities that then, I mean, those have to be approved by the policy board probably anyway, so that would, just letting the center of gravity be in the advisory council.
Okay. My tiny comment is I just wish we would have had a liaison for this meeting.
Thank you. We have a motion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So ordered unanimously.